My name is Elise Ward. I was in Texas helping survivors of domestic abuse rebuild their lives when my own life unravelled. I came home to a sold sign on the lawn of the house I'd built from nothing. Turns out my parents sold it, behind my back, to fund my brother's dream proposal in the Maldives. No warning, no apology, just a message. Thanks, sis. They thought I'd scream, beg, cry. I smiled instead, because what they didn't know is that I've been keeping receipts, and now it's time they learn what happens when the quiet daughter stops staying quiet. The spring air in Ohio carried a bite, as if winter hadn't fully given up its grip. Elise Ward tugged her coat tighter around her, the cotton still warm from the Texas sun just days before. 14 days in El Paso. 14 days of intense workshops, long nights debriefing with shelter leaders, comforting women who had lost everything, and now helping them find strength again. It had been exhausting yet empowering. Elise was proud of what she'd built, both in her work and in her life, but nothing, absolutely nothing, felt more grounding than the thought of coming back to her own home, her sanctuary, the house she spent a decade designing and paying for, down to the last floorboard and faucet. Her suitcase clicked softly against the concrete as she walked toward long-term parking. The familiar click-clack rhythm was comforting, predictable. Much like her life had become lately, steady, private, hers. She'd scheduled a roof inspection next week, ordered bulbs for the backyard, and even planned a dinner party for the following month. Elise smiled to herself as she unlocked her car. She was where she wanted to be, on her terms finally. As she drove through the winding streets of her neighbourhood, everything felt in place. The park still had the old swing set she'd helped the community fund. Mr. Salerno's tulips were blooming right on schedule. The paperboy tossed Sunday's edition onto porches with comical precision. Everything familiar. Until she turned onto Greystone Avenue. She slowed the car instinctively. Her foot hovered above the brake. At first her eyes didn't register it. A red and white rectangle stuck into the grass of her front yard. The word took a few more seconds to hit her, but once it did, it slammed her chest like a sledgehammer. Sold. Her brain tried to rationalise. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone put it in the wrong yard, but the post was clean, centred. The sign professionally installed. Elise stopped the car, heart thudding. She stepped out slowly, her heels crunching against the gravel driveway. The house looked empty, blinds pulled, porch light dead. Her stomach dropped. She reached into her purse, grabbed her keyring, tried the front door. The key didn't fit, not even a little. It wasn't jammed, it was changed. Her mouth went dry. Panic itched at the edges of her spine. She circled to the side entrance. Same story. Tried the back door. Locked. Unfamiliar lock. Elise pounded once, twice, called out. No answer. Nothing but the rustle of wind across the yard and the distant bark of a neighbour's dog. The driveway was empty. Her car, her other car, gone. As if she'd never lived there, like she'd been erased. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking slightly. No missed calls, no emails, no alerts. She opened her text thread with her parents. Nothing recent. Scrolled to her brother, Callum Ward, and as if summoned, a message popped up. Maldives is unreal, best trip of my life, couldn't have done it without you. Seriously, thanks, sis. Elise read it 3 times, each word sinking in like a shard of glass. Her thumb hovered above the reply bubble, then pulled back, her vision blurred. The Maldives? What the hell did that have to do with her house? She spun around, scanning the neighbourhood. Mrs. Langford, her neighbour 2 doors down, was sweeping her porch. Elise hurried over, forcing a calm tone. Janet, she said, voice tight. Hi, sorry to just show up, but did you see anything strange here? At my house? Janet looked up, startled. Oh, Elise, I thought you'd already moved. Elise blinked. Moved? Well, your parents came by with some movers 2 days ago, said you were relocating for work permanently. They were taking out furniture, loading everything into a truck. Elise's mouth fell open. And you didn't think to call me? Janet flushed. I assumed you told them to. I mean, they had the garage code, and your mum even waved at me from the porch, said you'd be sending your new address soon. Something cracked inside Elise, quiet but sharp. She nodded slowly. Thanks, Janet. Walking back to her car, her heart pounded like a war drum. They had moved her out, sold her house without telling her, without even asking. Who does that? Who sells their daughter's house while she's out doing charity work? She slid into the driver's seat, breathing hard. This isn't real, her brain whispered. It's a mistake. Misunderstanding. Has to be. But deep down, Elise knew it wasn't. She'd felt it creeping for years, subtle, disguised as passive-aggressive comments or uncomfortable dinners. Her role in the family had never been emotional. She was the provider, the strong one, the quiet fixer. And now they had cashed her in like a cheque. Elise didn't remember much of the drive to her parents' house, only that the steering wheel had deep marks from where her fingers clenched, and her jaw ached from the silence she forced herself to maintain. Their porch light was still broken. The wind chime still swung in the same odd rhythm, clinking off key. Familiar. Like nothing had changed. She rang the bell. The door opened within seconds. Her mother stood in a pale blue cardigan, smile tight like always. "Elise, you're back early." Not a trace of guilt. Not even hesitation. "Where's Dad?" Elise asked, stepping inside without waiting for permission. The house smelled like meatloaf and lavender air freshener, comforting if you didn't know better. "In the den," her mother said, watching reruns. Elise found him exactly where she'd expected, in the recliner, TV flashing across his face. He didn't turn to look at her. "Where's Callum?" she asked, standing still. "On a plane," her dad said without looking away. "Maldives with Julia." Elise folded her arms. "And my house?" He finally turned, eyes flat. "That? Oh, it's handled, just temporary, you know. Helping your brother get started. You're always off saving the world, Elise. We figured you wouldn't mind." It hit her like a cold slap. "Just temporary?" "You sold my house," she said, voice low. "That's not temporary." He shrugged. "The market's hot. You can get another. You always bounce back." Her mother chimed in from the hallway. "It's for Callum's future. You know how hard it's been for him lately. He needs a break, something stable. We're just trying to help." Elise blinked. Help? All those years, her sacrifices, the promotions, the endless hours, boiled beneath her skin like a volcano long overdue. But she didn't yell. She didn't let it spill. Instead, she reached into her bag, calmly, deliberately. She pulled out a cream-coloured folder, the edges slightly worn but the contents pristine. She opened it slowly and laid it on the coffee table between them. "That house," she said evenly, "was never yours to sell." Her dad frowned. "Excuse me?" She tapped the top page. "Living Trust, filed 6 years ago. The property is held under the name of the trust. I'm the sole trustee. You weren't even listed as secondary agents." He leaned forward, disbelief curdling into confusion. Her mother stepped closer. Why would you do that?" Elise looked at her squarely. "Because I've known for years that you can't be trusted with my name." The words hung in the room like smoke, thick, suffocating, undeniable. She didn't wait for the explosion. Instead, she let herself sink back into the memory. 6 years ago, Elise had just closed on the plot of land. She was giddy, excited to finally build a space of her own. She'd invited her friend Jessica, an estate attorney, over for wine and plans. Jessica had laughed after seeing her first draft of the deed. "You're putting your own name on it?" "Elise, no, trust me. Put it in a trust. Keep your name off public records. You work with vulnerable communities. You can't risk someone targeting you." Elise had hesitated back then, not because she didn't understand the logic, but because a part of her still wanted to believe her family wouldn't do anything wrong, that they'd never try to take what wasn't theirs. But then she remembered the birthday loan she gave Callum that vanished, the way her mother once opened her mail by mistake, the time her father used her credit card for emergencies without asking, small cracks, ones she never sealed. So she took Jessica's advice, filed the trust, quietly, no announcements, just a signature, a witness, and a sealed folder that now sat like a time bomb between them. "I want the documents," she said, standing again. "All of them. The sale agreement, the closing paperwork, the cheque, if it even exists." Her father's face was now blotchy red. "You think you're smarter than everyone, huh? Just because you got some law friend whispering in your ear?" Elise didn't blink. "No, I just finally stopped pretending we were a family." And with that, she walked out the front door, letting it close softly behind her. Monday morning brought grey skies and the kind of drizzle that never quite became rain. Elise pulled her hood up as she stepped out of her car, clutching a file folder and a thermos of black coffee she hadn't touched. The county clerk's office sat behind a row of brick buildings, nestled between a pawn shop and a bakery that still smelled like cinnamon. She had barely slept. Everything in her chest still burned. Anger, confusion, but most of all, disbelief. Her own parents, her own house. She needed clarity, proof, a paper trail. Inside, the office buzzed with fluorescent lights and quiet shuffling. She approached the counter, waited behind a man registering a boat trailer, and finally stepped up. "I need a copy of the real estate transaction for 2819 Greystone Ridge Drive," she said. The clerk, a young woman with dark-rimmed glasses and pink gel nails, nodded. "Do you have ID?" Elise handed over her driver's licence, fingers tense. The clerk typed for a few minutes, clicked a few times, then frowned. "Closed transaction. Looks like about 11 days ago. Let me print that for you." She slid the papers under the window and Elise took them to the small side bench. Her breath felt too loud in the empty room. She opened the file. First page, date, amount, buyer's name, a couple from out of state. Elise didn't recognise them. Second page, the deed transfer. Her name, her house, her signature, except it wasn't hers. She stared at the loopy cursive. It looked similar, enough to fool someone. But the tilt of the E was wrong. The cross of the T in Ward was too low. She'd signed thousands of documents in her career, and she knew this wasn't hers. Her stomach clenched. She flipped to the notary block, the section that validated everything. Name, Eleanor Ward. Relationship to signer, mother. License number, NA. Her heart dropped. Cold spread through her limbs like water slipping into cracks. She blinked. Her mother's name. Her mother had notarized the transaction. Her mother had signed as a legal witness to a signature she must have known was forged. Elise reread the block 3 times, hoping some mistake would appear. Hoping it said no relation, or former employer or neighbour. Anything but mother. But there it was, bold, black ink. She folded the page slowly and leaned back in the hard plastic chair. People walked past. A printer buzzed. Somewhere behind her, someone coughed. She couldn't move. The betrayal was colder than she'd imagined. Her father, she could believe that. Callum, absolutely. But her mother, the same woman who packed her lunch with little notes, who stayed up late sewing a last-minute prom dress when Elise couldn't afford one. It made no sense, unless it made too much sense. She stood and walked back to the counter, voice low but steady. "Hi, can you check something for me? This notary, Eleanor Ward, do you have a licence on file?" The girl looked up. Let me check." She typed, squinted, then raised an eyebrow. "Nope, no valid licence ever issued. That's weird. Usually notaries have to log everything with us." Elise managed a tight smile. "Thanks." She turned and walked out into the drizzle, the papers heavy in her coat. Her mother wasn't even a notary, never had been. So either she forged the notary status or someone else used her name. Either way, Eleanor was involved. A memory flickered to life as Elise crossed the sidewalk. 3 years ago, Elise had been fixing her mother's printer in her home office. Eleanor had sighed dramatically, searching through drawers. "I hate this paper clutter. Can't we just throw out old contracts once they're done?" Elise had hesitated. "Some of it you need to keep." "For how long?" 7 years, minimum." Her mum had rolled her eyes, frustrated. Elise had shrugged it off as another generational argument. But now she wondered. Back in her car, Elise stared at the dash. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even shaking. But something inside her had shifted. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about fraud, about lies dressed as love, about a woman she'd looked up to, a mother she thought might be the last person to cross a line, blurring it for Callum's sake. Because that's what it always came down to. Callum needed, Elise provided, Callum failed, Elise covered. And now Callum dreamed. Elise paid. She opened the glove compartment, pulled out a small black notebook, her quiet ledger, the one where she recorded passwords, reminders, old debts. She wrote one line, transaction #1, forged deed, witness, Eleanor Ward, date, April 3rd. She closed the notebook, then leaned her head back against the seat. This was just the beginning. Back at her apartment, Elise stood in front of her filing cabinet, the one she hadn't touched in months. The soft hum of the fridge filled the silence as she slid open the bottom drawer. Her fingers moved without thought, repetition guiding memory. Contracts, taxes, old HOA letters, and then an envelope labelled in her mother's handwriting, MISC 2018. She pulled it out, flipped through its contents, insurance forms, a warranty for a dishwasher long gone, a permission slip for Callum's art retreat, filed under her name as the emergency sponsor. That familiar pinch hit her chest, and then she paused. A memory clicked. 4 years ago, Elise had been reorganising her home office when her mother dropped by, just to say hi. Eleanor had stood at the doorway, peering inside. "Oh, I forgot. Can I borrow a paperclip or a stapler? Mine's jammed," she'd said. Elise had laughed, pointed to the drawer, and gone to the kitchen to make tea. She remembered it now, the way her mother lingered a little too long, flipping through things she didn't need to. Elise hadn't thought anything of it then. But now she couldn't unsee it. That was likely the moment her mother had taken a signed document, or at the very least memorised her signature style. Elise's chest tightened. She crossed the room and opened her laptop, fingers flying across keys. She logged into the archive of her home security app, an old system she'd installed before upgrading to a modern smart home hub. It took some digging, but eventually she found it. 3 instances, 3 separate dates over 2 years where her mother had been alone in the house while Elise was away at conferences. Each visit was labelled front door access familiar user. She clicked the first clip. The screen showed Eleanor stepping inside, glancing around, then heading straight for the office. The second clip, nearly identical. The third, Eleanor entering with a man, possibly a realtor, walking through the home, pointing at rooms, opening closets. Elise froze the video, her jaw slack. This wasn't casual curiosity. This was premeditation. She sat down hard, pulse drumming. Her mind raced. If they had done this with the house, what else had they touched? Bank accounts? Old 401? Cares? Elise opened her notebook again and started a new page, potential breaches. She began listing old condo in Cincinnati, closed 2012, college fund rollover, suspected interference 2005, retirement plan opened in 2014, check, beneficiaries, investment accounts with Fidelity, verify activity, Grandpa's will cross-check dates and witnesses. She felt like she was building a crime board. Every thread led back to the same people, her family. And she couldn't do this alone. Elise reached for her phone, scrolled past old work contacts, and paused on one name, Jessica Reeve, her old roommate from law school. Jessica had taken the estate and probate track, while Elise went non-profit. But they'd remained close until a few years ago. Work had gotten in the way, then life, and then silence. She hesitated only a second before tapping call. The line rang twice. "Elise?" came the voice on the other end, warm but surprised. Elise exhaled, suddenly aware she hadn't spoken to anyone all day. "Hey, Jess, I need your help. Legal help. It's about my family." A pause, then, "Tell me everything." And for the first time in weeks, Elise didn't feel alone. It started with a check. Not just any check, but the kind you write out carefully, hand over with trembling fingers, and hope you never regret. $25,000. That was the number. Elise remembered it clearly. Not because she had that kind of money to spare, but because it had taken 4 years to save. She'd withdrawn it from her emergency fund, sold a portion of her retirement shares early, and skipped her summer vacation to pull it together. It was a loan. At least that's what the napkin said. They had been sitting at a sushi place Callum liked, his idea. Elise had brought the paperwork, a simple promissory note outlining repayment terms, interest waived. She didn't want to treat him like a stranger, just a responsible adult. Callum had laughed, plucked a pen from the server's apron and scribbled his signature onto the napkin with exaggerated flair. "There, signed, sealed, blood oath made," he said with a wink. Elise had asked him to sign the real contract too, just to be formal. He'd rolled his eyes but complied. 12 months. That was the agreement. 6 weeks later, Elise was scrolling Instagram during a red-eye layover when she saw the photos. Custom Harley, Skyview Suite in Vegas, bottle service with someone tagged as Jules. The captions read like taunts. Living free. Startup money is meant to be spent. Sorry, not sorry, world. Elise's stomach had dropped. She hadn't even received a single update. She called him that night calmly, professionally, asked where the money went, if the app he claimed to be building was in beta. Callum had laughed, not nervously, not apologetically, just amused. "Come on, Liz, you make 6 figures. It's not like you'll miss it." That was when the switch flipped. That was when Elise stopped seeing him as someone she was obligated to protect. Now, years later, with Jessica on board, Elise began digging deeper, retracing every financial favour she'd extended, every string she'd allowed her family to pull. She opened an old hard drive where she kept digital archives. Her file labelled Callum Loan 2017 was intact, scanned contract, payment schedule, even text confirmations. But there was something else, a file she didn't remember saving. It was from a shared family email account she hadn't opened in years. She clicked. Inside was a series of scanned tuition invoices. The name, Callum Ward. Institution, Waldron School of Fine Arts. Amount, $62,500 per year. Elise's brow furrowed. Waldron was in New York. Prestigious, expensive, competitive. She remembered it, not because she attended, but because it was the school she'd once applied to herself. At 17, with dreams of becoming a designer, she'd gotten in, with partial scholarship, but her father had said no. "We can't afford that," he told her, not unkindly. "It's not practical, you'll understand one day." So she didn't go. Took night classes, stayed local, waited tables. And now, scrolling through these invoices, Elise saw payment notes. Funds transferred from Ward Education Reserve. Date, April 2005. She blinked. That was her graduation year. The account, Ward Education Reserve, was supposed to be hers, the one her grandparents had started when she was born. The same fund her father claimed had dried up after the recession. Her throat went dry. Callum hadn't just borrowed money. He'd stolen her future. A wave of grief swept through her, not fiery but dull, the ache of stolen time, lost versions of herself, the life she could have had. She closed the folder, then she opened a new one, labelled Restitution. Elise sat at her kitchen table, the laptop screen casting a cold glow on her face as she stared at the credit report she'd just downloaded. She hadn't checked it in over a year. She didn't need to. Her finances were always in order, no missed payments, no red flags, or so she thought. The first hit came halfway down the second page. Mortgage loan, approved 2016, lender Oakbridge Capital, amount $180,000, address 117 Baxter Lane, Cincinnati. Elise squinted. That was her old condo, the one she'd sold in 2014. She remembered the closing, the paperwork, the relief of paying off the last instalment. So why was her name tied to a new mortgage 2 years later? She scrolled down. There it was again. Auto loan. Approved 2018. Borrower Elise Ward co-signer. NA vehicle. Mercedes. GLE. Black Elise didn't own a Mercedes. Never had. She drove a practical hybrid. Her heart began to thud. The report listed 7 entries, mortgages, auto loans, even a credit line for a renovation project, all in her name, none of which she authorised. It was identity theft, and it had been going on for years. She sat back, breathing shallow. The walls of her apartment felt suddenly tighter, smaller. She opened her banking app, cross-referenced accounts, checked her old email. Nothing had alerted her. Nothing had tripped alarms. That meant whoever did this had access. Someone who knew her passwords, her habits, her history. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then typed the name she hadn't wanted to face. Franklin Ward. Her father. He used to handle her taxes in college. To help, he'd said. He knew her social, had copies of her ID, her bank statements. It wouldn't have taken much, just a little paperwork here, a forged signature there. A few clicks later, she found what she needed. The mortgage for Baxter Lane had a digital trail. It had been applied for using a scanned version of her old licence, the one she'd lost in 2015. She hadn't thought much of it then, reported it, got a new one, but someone, her father, had kept it and used it to buy a house for Callum. Elise closed the browser and pushed the laptop away. Her head throbbed. Her heart didn't even hurt anymore. It felt hollow, carved out. She stood, walked to the bookshelf and pulled down the old cedar box her grandfather had given her. Inside were photos, medals, birthday cards, and tucked beneath them a sealed envelope in fading ink. She'd never opened it. He'd handed it to her on her 30th birthday with a smile and said, "When you need to remember who you are." She peeled it open now, hands trembling. Inside was a letter, handwritten, slanted, careful script. It began, "To my granddaughter Elise, this house is yours, not just in spirit, but in name. I never trusted your parents to see you clearly. You are the root, not the branch. I've arranged for the deed to be transferred upon my passing. Your name, not theirs. Keep it safe. Keep yourself safe." Tears welled up but didn't fall. He had known. Somehow he had seen it. The imbalance, the injustice, the way her family leaned on her, yet never lifted her. Elise folded the letter, returned it to the envelope and placed it in the folder she'd started compiling. Deed, trust agreement, loan records, credit report, fraudulent activity log. She was building a case. Not just a legal one, but a personal reckoning. Her next meeting with Jessica wouldn't be exploratory. It would be strategic. The gloves were off. It came late at night, tucked between a spam offer for weight loss tea and a work reminder from the shelter board. The subject line was vague. "I shouldn't be telling you this." The sender was a Gmail address Elise didn't recognise. She almost deleted it. But something made her click. The message was short. "I'm sorry, I didn't know what they were doing until it was too late. I asked him if it was really his to sell. He laughed and said, 'She'll never catch it.' I recorded it. If you want the file, I'll send it. No strings. Just don't trace it back to me. My parents still think I went with him. I didn't. I left." Below the text was a Dropbox link. Elise hesitated, scanned the email for malware signs, then clicked. The audio was grainy at first, background noise, maybe a patio or a lounge. Wind, a clinking glass, then his voice. "Callum." "Nah, it was easy. I found an old doc she signed and practiced a bit. Mum helped. Honestly, she should thank me. We got way more than I expected. Enough to take Jules somewhere decent." A pause, then laughter. "And let's be real, she's not even blood. They adopted her from some state home, always treated her like a project." Elise froze. The air in the room seemed to vanish. She replayed the last line again. "She's not even blood." Her hands trembled, her throat tightened, her ears rang. Not blood? No one had ever said that to her, ever hinted, ever suggested. She stood, heart pounding, and walked to her closet, pulling down the metal lockbox she hadn't opened in years. Inside were her birth certificate, old-school IDs, hospital cards. Everything looked normal. Name, Elise Marie Ward. Parents listed, Eleanor and Franklin Ward. Date of birth, May 3rd, 1981. She read it again, then flipped to the back. A small stamp in the corner caught her eye. Certified reissue, 1992. 11 years after her birth. She felt her knees go weak. Why would a birth certificate be reissued more than a decade later? Why hadn't she seen that before? Memories flooded in, fragments that never made sense until now. Her parents never kept baby photos of her. Lost in a flood, they'd claimed. She looked nothing like them. Her hair had always been darker, her skin more olive. Neighbours used to comment. Callum blonde and blue-eyed like their father. Elise quiet and cautious, like someone raised to observe, not belong. She remembered the summer before high school, asking her mum why she never saw baby pictures of herself. Eleanor had waved her off, laughing nervously. We weren't into cameras back then. It had felt flimsy then. It felt damning now. Her entire life had been constructed on a script someone else wrote. She was the outsider given a roof, expected to be grateful for crumbs. She hadn't just been used, she'd been selected to be used, and worst of all, they never told her. They built a world around her pain and called it love. They handed Callum the crown and gave her the ledger. She opened her laptop again, went back to the email. There was another file attached, a screen recording. It showed a group chat. The name of the thread read, The Real Wards. It included her parents, Callum, 2 uncles, but not Elise. Messages flickered by. Wes will sulk, but she'll cave, she always does. She's not even one of us. Stop feeling bad. Tell Jules to keep quiet. She owes us. Her chest heaved. Not just betrayal, not just theft, erasure. They'd erased her long before the sale, long before the signatures, and they hadn't thought she'd notice. She closed the laptop, placed the recorder gently beside it, and sat in the dark, staring at nothing. They thought she was weak. They mistook her silence for absence, but now they'd made one mistake too many. Morning light streamed through Elise's window, golden and soft, but it only made the cold in her chest feel sharper. She hadn't slept, not truly. Just drifted between memories and possibilities, questions circling in her head like vultures. The screen recording of the group chat was still open on her laptop, paused at the cruelest line. She's not even one of us. That voice wasn't just Callum's anymore. It had grown into something more cavernous, echoing from every moment of silence she'd swallowed since childhood. She walked to the hallway closet, pulled down the fireproof lockbox she kept for life essentials, and dug until her fingers closed around a manila envelope labelled Birth and ID. She pulled out her birth certificate again, the reissued copy. It still said Eleanor and Franklin Ward, but something felt off. On instinct, she went to her filing cabinet, the oldest one, filled with past leases, expired insurance policies and random paperwork. It had a bottom drawer she hadn't touched in years. Elise sat on the floor, pulled open the drawer and began leafing through folders. After 10 minutes, her hands froze. There, pressed between an expired passport and an old vaccination record, was a folded document that didn't belong to anything else. The edges were brittle, faded. She unfolded it gently. Another birth certificate, but not the same one. This one was dated May 3rd, 1981, but the mother's name was Margaret L. Green. Father, unknown. Place of birth, Cleveland, Ohio. No mention of Eleanor. No mention of Franklin. Elise stared at it for what felt like an hour. There it was. Her truth. Not reprinted, not doctored, just hidden. Tucked away as if it might quietly disintegrate if left untouched long enough. She didn't cry, didn't shout. She just stood and got dressed. By the time she pulled into her parents' driveway, her fingers were ice around the steering wheel. The porch looked the same. Wind chimes, cracked welcome mat. A plastic sunflower wreath Eleanor swapped out each season. Nothing had changed, but everything had. She rang the bell. When Eleanor opened the door, her smile flickered for half a second, just enough for Elise to catch it. "Hi, sweetheart, you're up early." Elise held up the document wordlessly. Her mother's smile died. Eleanor's eyes darted to the paper. She didn't reach for it, didn't try to explain. For a long moment they just stood there, the weight of decades between them. Finally, Elise said, voice steady, "Was it so easy, keeping this from me?" Eleanor pressed her lips together. "You had a good life." "That's not what I asked. I did what I thought was best." "For whom?" Elise snapped, louder now. "For me or for the image, for the lie?" Eleanor turned her back, walked slowly towards the living room. Elise followed. "They said I wasn't yours," she said softly, "in that group chat. They laughed." Her mother sat down, hands in her lap. "We didn't think you'd ever need to know. It wouldn't change anything." "It changes everything." Silence. Elise sat across from her, but the distance between them felt like continents. "I was 5 when you told me monsters weren't real. You said families don't keep secrets. That lies are what break people." She let out a bitter laugh. "Turns out monsters live in quiet houses and wear aprons." Eleanor blinked once, but still said nothing. "You could have told me," Elise whispered, "years ago. You could have chosen to treat me like a person, not a placeholder." Eleanor finally met her eyes. "We loved you." "No," Elise said. "You used me." She stood, walked to the door. "Where are you going?" her mother asked, voice suddenly small. Elise didn't turn around. "To reclaim what's mine." The door clicked shut behind her. Back at her apartment, Elise moved like someone possessed. Her printer whirred to life as she hit print all. Contracts, loan documents, trust papers, fraudulent transaction records, screen captures of group chats, the fake notary, the credit report, and now the second birth certificate. Each paper laid on her kitchen table like a puzzle piece forming a picture she no longer needed to deny. This wasn't just about a house anymore, or a name, or even a family. This was about identity, about ownership, about truth. She placed everything into colour-coded folders, labelled in bold, fraudulent transactions, trust ownership proof, identity theft evidence, birth records, legal claim, group chat documentation. She wasn't suing them, not yet. She wasn't pressing charges, not yet. But she was making a statement, loud, legal, permanent. She would reclaim her story. If they had tried to erase her existence from the narrative, she would engrave it into public record. And this time they would read every word. The invitation came in the form of a text from her mother, 3 words, no punctuation. "Dinner this Sunday." No apology, no explanation. Just a command, cloaked in pleasantry. Elise stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over her screen. She knew what this was. Not a reconciliation, not a confession. It was a test, to see if she'd break, to see if the obedient daughter still lived behind her silence. She replied simply, "I'll be there." Not because she owed them, but because she needed to look them in the eye and see if they still dared to look back. That Sunday, just before dusk, she pulled into the same driveway she had walked away from as a teenager, determined never to return. The house hadn't changed. Same leaning mailbox, same overgrown hydrangeas, same wind chimes that never matched the wind. She took the USB drive from the centre console, checked the file one last time, then slid it into the pocket of her coat. Alongside it, a manila folder, inside a pristine copy of her grandfather's original will. As she stepped up to the porch, the door opened before she could knock. Her mother greeted her with a smile stretched thin. "You came. Good." Inside, the table was already set. Elise noted the symmetry. Napkins folded, glasses poured like this was any other family dinner, as if they hadn't stolen her house, her name, her story. Her father sat in his recliner, beer already in hand. "Elise," he said, as if acknowledging a neighbour. "Look who decided to stop sulking." Callum sat at the table, still tanned from tropical sun, scrolling his phone without looking up. "You guys would have loved the Maldives. Unreal." Elise didn't answer. She removed her coat slowly, hung it on the back of the nearest chair and took her seat. The food was warm, the air cold. Her mother passed her a plate. "Roast. Your favourite." Elise didn't touch it. They made small talk. Or tried. Her father mentioned a football game. Callum complained about airport security. Her mother said the hydrangeas were blooming late this year. Elise said nothing, until Callum leaned back and smirked. "So you're over it yet?" She tilted her head. "Over what?" He grinned. "The drama. It's just a house, Liz. You act like we burned it down." That was her moment. Elise reached into her bag, pulled out the manila folder and laid it flat on the table. Next, the USB drive. The room paused. "What's this?" her mother asked, her voice already faltering. Elise's tone was level. "This is what you tried to bury." She opened the folder, sliding out the will. "Grandpa left the house to me. Not to you, not to Dad. To me directly. I have the original document, notarized and dated before his passing, filed legally. Copies have already been sent to council." Her mother's hands began to tremble. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Then Elise tapped the USB. "And this," she continued, "is a recording of your golden son bragging about forging my signature. With your help, Mum." Callum's smile died. Her father leaned forward, jaw tightening. "You came here to threaten us?" "No," Elise said. "I came to see if you'd look me in the eyes." She rose slowly, gathering her coat. "I was invited for dinner," she said. "But what you really wanted was for me to sign something, wasn't it?" Her father's silence was confirmation enough. "Let me guess. An agreement, something that says I waive rights, that I forgive the misunderstandings. Her mother said nothing. Callum stared at his plate. Elise looked at each of them, one by one. I brought evidence. You brought meatloaf. She tucked the folder under her arm. I'm not hungry. Then she walked out, the wind chimes behind her, sounding more like laughter than music. The door hadn't even closed behind Elise when the storm began to erupt inside the dining room. Her mother was the first to crack. You don't understand what you're doing, Eleanor's voice broke as she rose from her chair, napkin falling to the floor. We were trying to protect the family. Tears ran down her face, not quiet ones of guilt, but desperate sobs of someone watching the consequences catch up. Callum stood so quickly his chair scraped against the floor, screeching like protest. You think this makes you powerful? That folder, that little flash drive. He slammed his fist onto the table, shaking the silverware. You're just bitter because I actually have something to live for. Elise turned back slowly, calmly. She said nothing, just opened her coat pocket and pulled out a small black device. She pressed play. Callum's voice filled the room again, louder this time, crystal clear over the silent dinner table. I found an old doc she signed and practised a bit. Mum helped. Honestly, she should thank me. We got way more than I expected. A beat of silence. Then, she's not even blood. Just a project they brought home. Eleanor gasped audibly. Her father stood up now, pointing a finger at Elise, red-faced and fuming. You smug little ingrate. Everything you have is because of us. Elise tilted her head. Everything I have is in spite of you. You lived under my roof, he spat, ate my food, went to school because we made it happen. No, Elise replied, her voice sharper now. I went to school because I worked double shifts, because I took out loans, because I never asked you for help, not after you emptied my college fund for Callum's music career. Eleanor stepped forward, arms trembling. We loved you. Elise laughed. Not bitter, not loud, just one sharp exhale of disbelief. You loved what I could do, not me. She looked around at the perfectly set table. The roast no one touched, the gravy slowly congealing in a ceramic bowl shaped like a leaf. This dinner wasn't about love, it was damage control. She tapped the flash drive in her palm. Unfortunately, it's a little late for that. Callum's voice turned hard. You want to play this game? Fine. But don't come crying when everything crashes down around you. Elise met his glare, unmoved. I'm not the one who forged a federal document. Her father stepped toward her now, chest puffed. Do you want to ruin your own family over a house? No, she said, voice now cold and absolute. I'm holding you accountable for decades of theft, fraud and lies. The house is just the start. Then she straightened, eyes steady. I was once the daughter of this family, she said, softly, letting the words sink into the walls. But tonight I'm just the witness to your undoing. She turned without another word, walked past the empty entryway, past the photos on the wall, smiling moments she now knew were curated illusions, past the coat hooks still labelled with names from childhood. Elise, Callum, Mom, Dad. At the door she paused. Eleanor's voice called behind her, broken and shaking. Please don't do this. Don't destroy us. Elise looked over her shoulder. I'm not destroying anything, she said. I'm just done pretending you didn't. She stepped outside. The door shut behind her like a gavel hitting the block. The air outside was sharp and cool, the sky stretching above her in soft blue twilight. For the first time in weeks, her chest didn't feel heavy. It felt hollow but clean. She slid into her car, placed the USB in the glove compartment and pulled out her phone. Jessica answered on the second ring. I'm ready, Elise said. Jessica didn't ask for clarification. You want civil or criminal? Both. A pause. Then, good. I already started the paperwork. They ended the call with no goodbyes. No need for pleasantries. Elise sat in her car for a moment longer, watching the house shrink in her rearview mirror. She had been born into a lie, raised in an illusion, and moulded into something they could exploit. But that part of her was dead now. The woman who walked out of that house wasn't their daughter anymore. She was a force, and she was just getting started. 3 days after the dinner, Elise stood in the sleek glass-walled office of Gilmore and Reeve LLP, watching the city stretch out beneath her. The legal assistant had just stepped out to grab a file, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the quiet hum of fluorescent lighting. She felt out of place in her sneakers and windbreaker, surrounded by mahogany tables and suits worth more than her first car. Jessica entered, briefcase in one hand, documents in the other. "It's done," she said without preamble. "We filed a temporary restraining order on all estate-linked transactions involving your parents. Banks, trusts, the title office, they're all locked down. Nothing moves without court oversight now." Elise nodded, relief subtle but present. "Good." Jessica placed the documents on the table and leaned against the edge, folding her arms. "They're going to scramble, probably already are. I hope they sweat." "They will." But just as quickly as the moment offered peace, Elise's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, not recognising the number until she saw the message, screenshot attached, a group text thread. Elise wasn't in it. Again. The group name, Ward Damage Control. The message, "Let's not forget she once tried to evict her sick mother," might be worth reminding the press if this goes public. Another line, probably from Callum. "She'll look like a monster. She has no friends left to vouch for her anyway." Below that was an image, fabricated but well designed. It looked like an email, dated 3 years ago, supposedly from Elise to a lawyer. The content, a demand that her mother be removed from the property due to emotional interference and undue attachment. Elise stared at the screen, jaw clenched. The formatting was eerily close to her real correspondence. The phrasing mimicked her tone, but it was fake, manufactured slander. Jessica stepped beside her, reading over her shoulder. "They're trying to assassinate your character. Classic misdirection." Elise didn't flinch. "They're scared." Jessica raised a brow. "You want to respond?" Elise didn't answer. Instead, she opened her cloud drive, found the audio file and tapped Share. She copied the link, opened her social media app and composed a new post. "Truth has a voice. Here's mine." She pasted the link. No hashtags, no long explanation, just silence broken by clarity. Within 20 minutes, it had over 300 shares. People listened. Callum's voice spilled from speakers across living rooms, kitchens and earbuds. "She's not even blood, just a project they brought home. Easy to manipulate, gets the job done." Then her mother's quiet confirmation. "It's not like she needs to know." Elise didn't say anything more. She let the evidence speak. Let the silence that had once protected her family now serve as their undoing. Text messages poured in, some from distant relatives. "I had no idea." Others from college friends. "Are you okay? We believe you." And then the phone rang. Jessica picked it up, listened, nodded. "They want to meet," she said after hanging up. "Mediation. No court yet. They're trying to cut a deal." Elise didn't smile. "They want silence." Jessica met her eyes. "What do you want?" Elise looked out the window again. "I want a record. I want them to know I'm not backing down." She paused. "And I want them to hear me, finally. Loud enough they can't pretend they didn't." Later that night, she received one last message from an anonymous account again. But this time it was just a single sentence. "You deserved better. I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner." Elise closed the screen. She didn't need apologies. She needed accountability. And she was going to make damn sure they got it. The courtroom was small. No jury box. Just a judge, a court reporter and 2 long tables facing each other like battleground trenches. Elise sat straight-backed beside Jessica, the thick stack of evidence files neatly organised in front of them. Across the aisle, her parents and Callum looked unusually diminished. No wind chimes, no roast dinners, no smug grins. Just silence. The clerk called the session to order. The judge, a woman in her 50s with grey-streaked hair and wire-rimmed glasses, looked over the docket. Her voice was neutral, calm. "This is a hearing regarding the alleged fraudulent transfer and misuse of estate assets involving the Ward Trust and related parties. Miss Ward, you may begin." Jessica stood first, calm and deliberate. She handed over an indexed binder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. "Your Honour, this binder contains documentation outlining multiple counts of property fraud, forged signatures, identity misuse and unauthorised financial transactions, all initiated by the respondents, Mr. and Mrs. Ward and their son, Callum Ward." The judge flipped open the binder. Jessica continued. Here is the deed, illegally transferred. The trust agreement showing Elise as sole beneficiary. A notarization by Eleanor Ward, despite no valid notary licence on file. And here, she tapped another tab, is the forged signature matched against authenticated handwriting samples. Elise watched as her parents sat stiff and silent. Callum looked pale, jaw clenched so tightly a vein bulged near his temple. Jessica wasn't done. She pulled out a small remote and tapped it. The court speakers clicked on. Then Callum's voice filled the room. She's not even blood. Just a project they brought home, easy to manipulate. Wow, followed by Eleanor's soft reply. It's not like she needs to know. No one spoke. The judge leaned forward. Do the respondents have any response to this recording? Their attorney, a younger man who'd clearly been hired in haste, stammered. Your Honour, we question the authenticity of this audio. Jessica cut in. We've had it verified by an independent lab. Authentication certificate included in Exhibit C. The judge held up the paper already in her binder. I see it. For a moment, Elise thought it was over. But then Jessica spoke again. There's one more matter, Your Honour, a newly uncovered transaction. She slid a final folder across the table. Elise already knew what it was. Jessica opened it for the room. In 2013, shortly after the passing of the late Margaret Green, a life insurance policy payout was claimed. The beneficiary listed was Elise Ward. However, she turned another page, the claim was processed using a faxed signature that does not match Elise's handwriting, and the payout was directed to an offshore account linked to Franklin Ward. The judge's eyes narrowed. Jessica delivered the final blow. Elise never received a cent from that policy. Her identity was used without consent and the funds were hidden. Gasps from the courtroom gallery. Elise barely noticed them. Her father didn't even flinch. He looked tired. Or maybe just finished. The judge sat back. Mr. Ward, do you deny authorising this transaction? Silence. Mr. Ward? Still nothing. Jessica glanced at Elise. The judge closed the binder and removed her glasses. Very well, I am issuing the following ruling. 1. All assets illegally transferred from the Ward Trust are to be returned to the named trustee, Elise Ward, within 30 days. 2. Mr. and Mrs. Ward, along with Mr. Callum Ward are hereby fined for their participation in documented forgery, identity misuse and attempted coercion. 3. A permanent restraining order will be placed. The respondents are not to contact or attempt to contact Miss Ward by any means, personal, legal or digital. 4. Criminal referral will be forwarded to the county prosecutor. Further charges may follow. Elise exhaled slowly. Not in relief, not in triumph, just release. Her voice had finally been heard, not because she screamed louder, but because she had stopped whispering. As the courtroom emptied, her parents stood still wordless. Callum turned once, looked at her like he didn't recognise her anymore. Good. She didn't recognise him either. Jessica packed the folders in silence. Elise reached for the letter from her grandfather, still tucked in her planner. She didn't need it anymore, but she carried it anyway. Some truths, once found, deserve to stay close. The lot was empty. Where once there had been walls, windows, light fixtures, Elise had picked out one by one from dusty hardware store shelves. Now there was only silence and the slow creep of weeds reclaiming cracked concrete. She parked along the curb, turned off the engine and sat for a long moment in the driver's seat, her hands resting gently on the steering wheel. The sun was soft that morning. Pale orange light filtered through the trees, dappling the ground where her porch used to be. The mailbox was gone. So were the garden beds. The creaky gate that Callum broke and never fixed. Gone too, all of it. Levelled in the clean-up after the illegal sale was reversed. All of it, erased. And yet, as Elise stepped out of her car, she didn't feel loss. She felt clarity, a strange peace. Like someone who had been holding her breath for years and was finally learning how to exhale. She crossed the lot, her boots crunching over dried leaves and broken twigs. She stopped roughly where the front door used to be and looked out at the space that had once been her living room. A place where she'd hosted quiet dinners, celebrated a job promotion alone with a cheap bottle of wine, nursed heartbreak on the couch with a fleece blanket and an old movie. None of that was here anymore, but she remembered it all. From her coat pocket, she pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. She knelt down carefully, brushed aside a patch of dry dirt, and began to dig with her hands. The soil was firmer than she expected, unbothered by time, unmoved by trespass. She dug slowly, methodically, until the hole was deep enough. Then she unwrapped the object. It was a glass orb, roughly the size of a baseball, cloudy at the edges but still intact. Inside it, suspended in clear resin, was a tiny sculpture, a fragile, crooked little tree surrounded by flecks of green glitter. The kind of project only an 11-year-old would call art. It had been part of a school fair. Design your future. Elise remembered being so proud of it. She'd told her teacher the tree meant, things can grow even in small places. Her parents had dismissed it. Her father had said it was cute but pointless. Her mother had smiled politely and set it on a dusty shelf. But Elise had kept it, quietly, like a secret. Now, years later, it felt more profound than ever. She placed it gently into the hole, the glass cool against her skin. Then she covered it with earth, pressed it down, and whispered, "The tree and glass can't grow, but it never rots." She sat there for a while longer, her hands dirty, knees damp from morning dew. The world was still. Just the rustle of branches above her, the occasional chirp of a bird in the distance. No accusations, no demands, no expectations, just soil. She wasn't sure how long she stayed like that, but eventually she stood, brushed off her jeans and looked around once more. It wasn't her home anymore, but it had been hers once, and that mattered. It had shaped her, tried to break her and failed. Back in the car, she started the engine and drove in silence. She didn't cry, she didn't look back. Not because she didn't care, but because she no longer needed to. Her healing didn't live in the past. It lived in what came next. The new house was nothing like the old one. It sat on a gentle slope facing the sea, tucked between a stretch of coastal pines and a winding gravel road that no one used unless they lived nearby. The shingles were worn, the paint slightly faded, and the mailbox tilted like it hadn't stood straight in years. But Elise loved it the moment she stepped onto the porch. It didn't have polished floors or a gourmet kitchen. There were no imported tiles or custom cabinetry. The ceiling creaked when the wind blew hard. One of the windows refused to open without a firm nudge. The backyard was overgrown, full of tangled weeds and wild rosemary. But it had something her last house never did. It had quiet, real quiet. Not the kind you forge by keeping your voice down, or holding back your opinions, or playing the dutiful daughter, but the kind that fills the room because no one is demanding anything from you. It had truth. The paperwork was signed in her name. No trust to shield her. No loopholes for anyone else to exploit. Just Elise Ward, owner, occupant, architect of her own peace, and it had space. For the first time in years, she felt like she could expand, not physically, spiritually. It was late September when she moved in. The breeze carried the scent of salt and pine, and the evenings turned cool enough to light a fire. She spent her first night there sitting on the floor of her living room, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, sipping tea from a chipped mug she hadn't used since grad school. No one called. No one knocked. It was perfect. Weeks passed, slowly, beautifully. She planted a lemon tree near the back fence, bought a new bookshelf and filled it only with books she actually loved, not the ones she felt she should read. She donated half her wardrobe, recycled old holiday cards, burned a letter she had once written to her father but never sent. She made space, and then one day she invited people in. Not family, not the past. Just those who had stayed. Jessica came, of course, wearing flats and carrying a bottle of red wine. Elise's former colleague from the non-profit shelter showed up with bread still warm from the oven. Her neighbour from 3 houses down brought a strawberry tart and a shy smile. They sat around her new kitchen table, mismatched chairs, borrowed placemats, and laughed. They passed plates, swapped stories, poured more wine than they should have. No one asked about court cases. No one mentioned the name Callum or Eleanor or Franklin. The silence wasn't heavy. It was respectful. No ghost sat at that table, just Elise, and the people who had seen her not as a role or a function, but as a whole person. At one point, someone asked about the backyard. "You planning to landscape it?" they said, peering out the window at the wild herbs and overgrown grass. Elise looked out too, thought for a moment. "No," she said. "I think I like it wild." The table chuckled, nodded, moved on. Later that night, when the dishes were drying and the guests had gone, Elise stepped outside alone. The stars were visible, clear, clean, unbothered by city lights. The ocean whispered just beyond the edge of the yard. She stood barefoot on the porch, arms folded, and for the first time in years she allowed herself to say the words she'd been carrying since it all began. "They sold my house," she whispered to the sky, "but they never owned my peace, and they never will." There was no applause, no thunder, no swelling music. Just the wind in the rosemary and the gentle creak of wood beneath her feet. But that was enough. She turned back towards the house, her house, and stepped inside.